So, hello and welcome to our Tarot On of 2020, the pandemic special. We are in, I think, the first week or so of lockdown here in the UK, and people all around the world are under different stages of lockdown to deal with the pandemic. And we're doing a series of live videos here in the Tarot Professionals group on behalf of the Tarot Association, and we're having a bedtime story each evening, and we are discussing tarot and Lenormand, oracle cards, all sorts of other divinations and magic. We've been reading from Wake World by Aleister Crowley in Conks on Pax, and exploring a journey up the Tree of Life, which is a spiritual journey from the top to the bottom of the Tree of Life, with all of the stages of challenge and insight that are required to eventually get to the top of the tree. And today we're going to do a longer reading from Georges Borges, and that's going to take about 15 minutes, a short story I'm going to read. And even though it's not directly tarot related, it sort of is if you go back and look at a lot of the other videos that we've already done as we've explored this journey up the Tree of Life. We're going to see how Borges describes that. And we're going to just start with a Lenormand lesson, just a brief Lenormand lesson, because one of the things that since Tali and I produced the sort of Cards of Antiquity campaign to bring back Lenormand in the particularly in the English speaking world, and this is a copy of the this is the tin, but this is a copy of the original box in the British Museum that the deck comes from, the Game of Hope. That's in German, or the Game of Experiences, or whatever this, on the bottom. So the Lenormand cards are a very interesting deck because they're read slightly differently, and we have gone a little bit beyond where we started from, because I guess, like with every system, you start to explore and experiment with it and work out how it works best for you. And one of the things that I wanted to show you today in Lenormand reading, and it sort of works in other systems, but particularly Lenormand, is the sort of language or the system or pattern that you use. And hello to Italy, hello to Ziga, hello to I think Derek's with us, and Shari and Lily, Letitia and Adela from New York City. I hope you're doing very well there at the moment, because obviously everyone needs to keep themselves very safe and sane in all of the various hot spots that we have for the pandemic at the moment. So what we have is every sort of system, divination system, has its own language. So, for example, the Tarot de Marseille, the runes, the I Ching, the Lenormand tarot, they all have their own sort of language. And sometimes it's very interesting to find out what the language of the deck actually is. And what I've found is sometimes that, say, for example, runes, if you actually write your divination or interpretation of runes in a rune stave, Old English Germanic poetry form, particularly one of the very guttural verse forms that belong to that culture, that time, that period, it really empowers the reading. It makes a very unique reading. And with Lenormand, they have a very literal way of reading. But one of the things we've been experimenting with, and I've been playing around with recently, is using a sort of I Ching style. I was reading a lot more about the I Ching again, because I use that a lot for the Secrets of the Thoth tarot books that I was writing. And Crowley used the I Ching far more than he ever used tarot, and of course he never used his own Thoth deck because it wasn't published in his lifetime. So I got back to thinking about the I Ching, and I noticed that with my Lenormand readings, particularly if I'm only using a few cards, like 4 cards in this example, that you can do a very literal I Ching reading. And so if you have a reading, and so this is just all I wanted to show you and demonstrate today. So if I put the cards this way around. So what I've been doing on our Instagram feed every weekend is a 3-card reading. Okay, so a 3-card reading. And for each of them, I demonstrate within a minute, all of the videos are just 1 minute long, how to just read sort of 3 cards, in this case reading sort of this way. And then I pull a 4th card at the bottom to lay on top of it to give what in old cartomancy was called a surprise card. Quite often at the end of the reading you'd pull an extra card as a surprise card, and it was a little bit like giving your client a sort of extra bonus before they left, so that they felt as if they got their money's worth. Also, sometimes it would consolidate the whole reading in 1 card, sometimes it would turn the whole reading on its head with 1 card, hence a surprise card. So I've been adopting that method with 3-card readings, because I prefer to read a lot more cards with Lenormand, and then having a surprise card to lay on top. And the only lesson that I wanted to teach today is this, which is basically it's quite nice to make a little I Ching form verse, or not so much a verse, more like a saying or something like that, from the cards, and have a single word to end, a bit like I think currently Donald Trump is lampooned a little bit for having like these tweets where at the end there's just 1 word, like sad or you know great or something like that. There's just like a 1 word at the end to emphasize the point. And it's a very peculiar language style, but it works very well with I Ching style reading of Lenormand. So here we have the tower, meaning bureaucracy, borders, and in this case big government, because I'm doing these like as a global reading. The clouds, which is always confusion, and the mountains, which is obstacles. So we basically have borders, confuse, obstacles. Okay. But you could have big government is being confused and is about to can't see the mountains, can't see the obstacles, will meet obstacles. The obstacles, or if we read the other way, the obstacles are currently hidden by the clouds so that you can't see them from the watchtower, because in Lenormand this is a picture of a watchtower. You can actually see the original that J.K. Hechtel probably drew this from, or had an artist draw it anyway. Excuse me. So it was a watchtower, and these were places of bureaucracy. They guarded the borders. So in modern day Lenormand reading, particularly psychological readings that some people say you can't do with Lenormand, but you can, this can be anxiety, and this can be personal space, personal borders, and this can obviously be long-standing obstacles and life challenges. So you can read Lenormand very well, very powerfully, as a psychological or psychotherapeutic language as well as it being very literal. But if we want to be literal, how about this? If you make a little story from these in a sort of I Ching style, and then add 1 word from the card at the bottom. Okay, so in this case I would say the paper stampers, so the people in the tower stamping the passports and the borders and the government officials Or in I Ching, quite often you have things like the cauldron, the mountain, the king, and things like this as part of the trigrams to make the language up, or the fox and things like this. So here we could have the watchmen, for example, or the guards. The guards cannot see the mountains through the clouds. The guards, clouds, mountains. So the paper stampers cannot see the oncoming mountains through the clouds. Okay, makes sense? So just make a little sentence of it and see if you can actually make a story, a very literal one. And then you can apply it to the question that someone has asked very powerfully. And then to add the final card, and to keep it very simple, this is obviously the card in Lenormand. It's a negative card, it means suffering. So the bureaucrats cannot see the mountains for the clouds. Great suffering. Okay, and that sounds like an I Ching hexagram or trigram reading. Okay, so the bureaucrats cannot see the oncoming mountains through the clouds. Great suffering. Okay, so the answer obviously to that divination would be to find out the source of the confusion or the obstacle and work out how you can prepare to get round the mountains and avoid the suffering, which is why you have more cards in Lenormand, so that you can actually develop the reading with a lot more detail. Okay, makes sense? So if you read a few I Ching hexagrams in the any of the translations, my favourite at the moment is Stephen Karsh's, although you can read some of the classics like the Wilhelm translation. Then draw some Lenormand cards and then reword them. Well, whip is not really suffering. Whip is argument mainly, and punishment. So in the original Lenormand, in both the Game of Hope instructions and the coffee cards, from which a lot of the interpretations came, the whip is more to do with interpersonal mastery, submission, argument, power, power dynamics, and things like that. Whereas the cross is absolute suffering. It is not the card that you want at all. It's a very negative card in Lenormand. Okay. So that was all I wanted to talk about in terms of practical methods. So if that's all you're interested in, then that's the end of our practical methods. We are going to go back to far more practical methods over the coming sessions, so that we can eventually get to a bit of magical work with our cube of space. But I wanted to sum up all of our previous work of going up the tree of life through Wake World in this story that I'd like to read, that my teacher used to read to me quite often, by Borges, in a collection called Labyrinths. And this story is called, if I can find it, The God's Script. So this is called The God's Script, and it's a short story which will take me about 15 minutes to read. And I wanted to read it as well because as we cover some tarot magic that we're going to cover, some people often ask, a bit like I was explaining the ritual to the Lares and Penates yesterday, if you're a magician, why don't you make lots of money? Why don't you just generate anything that you wanted? Now, the reason is very simple. You can actually do a lot of those things. However, there's always a cost to them, and the state of mind that you have to be in is very strange to make magic work. Aleister Crowley called it working without lust of results. You have to want the thing that you want absolutely laser sharp, accurately, wholly and solely, and at the same time you have to totally not want it, really, truly, absolutely not care about it, and be totally disassociated and non-attached to the result. And there's a liminal state in between those two states where magic actually catches and works. But obviously it's a very unique state to be in, so that's why it's very difficult to make magic actually work for exactly what you want and get away with it without there being not being an overbalance in some other part of your life. One of my first examples, other than waving a coin at the moon and getting some money the following day from my dad, which was the very first magical ritual I ever did, or consciously ever did, was when I was going to my witchcraft initiation. And I was just turned 18, I had a bike, it was going to take me about 2 hours to cycle to where I was being initiated, and it looked like it might rain. I didn't want to turn up to my initiation totally wet, and particularly as it would be a sky-clad initiation and I didn't want to catch pneumonia. So I cast a candle magic spell. I'd started to practice already for a couple of years by then, and I did a candle magic spell and the weather magically cleared. It was almost like as I cycled between a little village 10 miles north of Derby all the way to the other side of Derby and then to Nottingham, which was a good couple of hours bike ride away. It was almost like there was a channel of clear sky all the way. And I got there and I told those initiating me that I'd managed to do this spell absolutely fine. Of course, you can bet it absolutely threw it down, chucked it down the moment I sat back. It made up for it and absolutely drenched me totally all the way back. 2 hours of absolutely driving rain like nothing I'd ever seen before. I could barely see in front of my bicycle. And of course it was a balance, and it was an overbalance. Because if you push the universe one way very hard, it will push back again. So you have to find this middle gap. And the universe is very economical. In effect, it always, it is one unit, it is one thing. So as a result, it will not give people the sort of power where they could just mess around with things. It just wouldn't work like that, because if you think about it, if all of us could just have anything we wanted just by thinking about it, it'd be absolute chaos. I can't even imagine what it would be like after about half a second of that being the case. The universe would literally just fall apart. It would be like when a group of us in an IT class were given on our last day of term full admin access to the main servers. Obviously they were decoupled from the rest of the college's main network, and we were told to do whatever we wanted and try and hack them and hack each other and everything. And because we'd spent 2 years studying computing, one of the most hilarious things was actually sending keyboard commands from one keyboard to a totally different monitor. So some of us were trying to hack and stop other people. We were typing in, looking at our screen, and then having to go to another screen to find what we typed in and stuff. And we basically broke the entire system and screwed each other over within about 7 minutes, I think it took us. So the universe does not work like that. Okay? And yes, everyone else will put in their orders, and as Alice Crowley says, we are often a ship that goes one way and then goes the other and then goes another way, and we zigzag all of the time and never get anywhere. Alice Crowley promoted a form of thelema where our will is directed and we set our sights and we keep going, and we just keep going, and we always go in a straight line. It's one of the most difficult things to do as a human being. So if you can imagine everyone trying to think that they know where they're going and it having instant results, it just wouldn't work like that. So this is all in a way to introduce the God script and to talk about the initiatory journey all the way from the bottom to the top, so that we can set our sights in a particular way. Excuse me. So this is called the God Script. It will take about 15 minutes to read, and it is our bedtime story for the weekend, for Saturday evening, the 4th of the 4th, 2020, which adds to 4 as well. We're currently, Charlie Goodwin and I are currently writing a book on numerology under our name Andrea Green, and that should be out soon, but it's very strange being aware of numbers all of the time while we're writing it. So, The God Script by Borges. The prison is deep and of stone, its form that of a nearly perfect hemisphere, though the floor, also of stone, is somewhat less than a great circle, a fact which in some way aggravates the feeling of oppression and of vastness. A dividing wall cuts it at the centre. This wall, although very high, does not reach the upper part of the vault. In one cell am I, Sinacan, magician of the pyramid of Qualahum, which Pedro de Alvedaro devastated by fire. In the other there is a jaguar, measuring with secret and even paces the time and space of captivity. A long window with bars flush with the floor cuts the central wall. At the shadowless hour, midday, a trap in the high ceiling opens, and a jailer whom the years have gradually been effacing manoeuvres an iron sheave and lowers for us, at the end of a rope, jugs of water and chunks of flesh. The light breaks into the vault, and in that instance I can see the jaguar. I've lost count of the years I've lain in the darkness. I, who was young once and who could move about this prison, am incapable of more than awaiting, in the posture of my death, the end destined to me by the gods. With a deep obsidian knife I have cut open the breasts of victims, and now I could not, without magic, lift myself from the dust. On the eve of the burning of the pyramid, the men who got down from the towering horses tortured me with fiery metals to force me to reveal the location of a hidden treasure. They struck down the idol of the god before my very eyes, but he did not abandon me, and I endured the torments in silence. They scourged me, they broke and deformed me, and then I awoke in this prison from which I shall not emerge in mortal life. Impelled by the fatality of having something to do, of populating time in some way, I tried in my darkness to recall all that I knew. Endless nights I devoted to recalling the order and the number of stone-carved serpents, or the precise form of a medicinal tree. Gradually, in this way, I subdued the passing years. Gradually, in this way, I came into possession of that which was already mine. One night I felt I was approaching the threshold of an intimate recollection. Before he sights the sea, the traveller feels a quickening in the blood. Hours later I began to perceive the outline of that recollection. It was a tradition of the god. The god, foreseeing that at the end of time there would be a devastation and ruin, wrote on the first day of creation a magical sentence with the power to ward off these evils. He wrote it in such a way that it would reach the most distant generations and not be subject to chance. No one knows where it was written nor with what characters, but it is certain that it exists secretly and that the chosen one shall read it. I considered that we were now, as always, at the end of time, and that my destiny as the last priest of the god would give me access to the privilege of intuiting the script. The fact that a prison confined me did not forbid my hope. Perhaps I had seen the script of Qualahun 1,000 times and needed only to fathom it. This reflection encouraged me and then instilled in me a kind of vertigo. Throughout the earth there are ancient forms, forms incorruptible and external. Any one of them could be the symbol I sought. A mountain could be the speech of the god, or a river, or the empire, or the configuration of the stars. But in the process of the centuries, the mountain is levelled and the river will change its course. Empires experience mutation and the havoc and the configuration of the stars varies. There is change in the firmament. The mountain and the star are individuals, and individuals perish. I sought something more tenacious, more invulnerable. I thought of the generations of cereals, of grasses, of birds, of men. Perhaps the magic would be written on my face. Perhaps I myself was the end of my search. That anxiety was consuming me when I remembered that the jaguar was one of the attributes of the god. Then my soul filled with pity. I imagined the first morning of time. I imagined my God confiding his message to the living skin of the jaguars, who would love and reproduce without end, in caverns, in cane fields, on islands, in order that the last men might receive it. I imagined that net of tigers, that teeming labyrinth of tigers, inflicting horror upon pastures and flocks in order to perpetuate a design. In the next cell there was a jaguar. In his vicinity I perceived a confirmation of my conjecture and, perhaps, a secret favour. I devoted long years to learning the order and the configuration of the spots. Each period of darkness conceded an instant of light, and I was able thus to fix my mind the black forms running through the yellow fur. Some of them included points, others formed cross lines on the inner side of the legs, others ring-shaped were repeated. Perhaps they were a single sound or a single word. Many of them had red edges. I shall not recite the hardships of my toil. More than once I cried out to the vault that it was impossible to decipher that text. Gradually, the concrete enigma I laboured at disturbed me less than the generic enigma of a sentence written by a god. What type of sentence, I asked myself, will an absolute mind construct? I considered that even in the human languages there is no proposition that does not imply the entire universe. To say the tiger is to say the tigers that begot it, the deer and turtles devoured by it, the grass on which the deer feed, the earth that was mother to the grass, the heaven that gave birth to the earth. I considered that in the language of a god every word would enunciate that infinite concatenation of facts, and not in an implicit but an explicit manner, and not progressively but instantaneously. In time, the notion of a divine sentence seemed puerile or even blasphemous. A god, I reflected, ought to utter only a single word, and in that word absolute fullness. No word uttered by him can be inferior to the universe, or less than the sum total of time. Shadows, or simulacra, of that single word equivalent to a language, and to all a language can embrace, are the poor and ambitious human words, all, world, universe. One day, or one night, what difference between my days and nights can there be? I dreamt that there was a grain of sand on the floor of the prison. Indifferent, I slept again. I dreamt I awoke, and that on the floor there were 2 grains of sand. I slept again. I dreamt that the grains of sand were 3. They went on multiplying in this way until they filled the prison, and I lay dying beneath that hemisphere of sand. I realized that I was dreaming. With a vast effort, I roused myself and awoke. It was useless to awake. The innumerable sand was suffocating me. Someone said to me, "You have not awoken to wakefulness, but to a previous dream. This dream is enclosed within another, and so on to infinity, which is the number of grains of sand. The path you must retrace is interminable, and you will die before you ever really awake. I felt lost. The sand burst my mouth, but I shouted, "A sand of dreams cannot kill me, nor are there dreams within dreams." A blaze of light awoke me. In the darkness above there grew a circle of light. I saw the face and hands of the jailer, the sheave, the rope, the flesh, and the water jugs. A man becomes confused gradually with the form of his destiny. A man is, by and large, his circumstances. More than a decipherer or an avenger, more than a priest of the god, I was one imprisoned. From the tireless labyrinth of dreams I returned as if to my home in the harsh prison. I blessed its dampness. I blessed its tiger. I blessed the crevice of light. I blessed my old suffering body. I blessed the darkness and the stone. Then there occurred what I cannot forget nor communicate. There occurred the union with the divinity, with the universe. I do not know whether these words even differ in meaning. Ecstasy does not repeat its symbols. God has been seen in a blazing light, in a sword, or in the circles of a rose. I saw an exceedingly high wheel, which was not before my eyes, nor behind me, nor to the sides, but every place at one time. That wheel was made of water, but also of fire, and it was, although the edge could be seen, infinite. Interlinked, all things that are, were, and shall be formed it, and I was one of the fibres of that total fabric, and Pedro de Alvarado, who tortured me, was another. There lay revealed the causes and the effects, and it sufficed me to see that wheel in order to understand it all without end. O bliss of understanding, greater than the bliss of imagining or feeling. I saw the universe, and I saw the intimate designs of the universe. I saw the origins narrated in the Book of the Common. I saw the mountains that rose out of the water. I saw the first men of wood, the cisterns that turned against the men, the dogs that ravaged their faces. I saw the faceless God concealed behind the other gods. I saw infinite processes that formed one single felicity, and understanding it all, I was also able to understand the script of the tiger. It is a formula of 14 random words. They appear random. And to utter it in a loud voice would suffice to make me all-powerful. To say it would suffice to abolish this stone prison, to have daylight break into my night, to be young, to be immortal, to have the tiger's jaws crush Alvarado, to sink the sacred knife into the breasts of the Spaniards, to reconstruct the pyramid, to reconstruct the empire. 40 syllables, 14 words, and I, Sincan, would rule the lands Motsukuma ruled. But I know I shall never say these words, because I no longer remember Sincan. May the mystery lettered on the tigers die with me. Whoever has seen the universe, whoever has beheld the fiery designs of the universe, cannot think in terms of one man, of that man's trivial fortunes or misfortunes, though he be that very man. That man has been he, and now matters no more to him. What is the life of that other to him, the nation of that other to him, if he now is no one? This is why I do not pronounce the formula, why, lying here in the darkness, I let the days obliterate me. The tiger's script, or the jaguar's script in Labyrinths by Georges Louis Borges. and perhaps you saw some specific or implied tarot symbols in the story. Perhaps you saw in that story the progression of the tree of life. Perhaps you saw some Kabbalistic descriptions in there. Whatever you heard in that story, even if it was a story of a man and a jaguar, I hope you enjoyed the bedtime story for this evening. So tomorrow we're going to start back into our tarot so that we can head towards our cube of space. And as ever, we're going to do some practical techniques every day. I'm going to be introducing NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, as a way of both delivering and delivering interpretations, reading tarot, and more importantly, communicating with the client. At the moment, my personal cartomantic method or divinatory contemplation every day is to take a couple of cards from my Philosopher's Stone deck, which is unfortunately out of print at the moment, and lay them out. I'm putting these on my personal wall. If you're interested, I've set them to public so that people can take a look at them if they're interested. And every day I'm getting 2 cards and taking a look at them and putting them together. So at the moment we have something breaking apart and an origin leading to connection, an origin of connection, a start of connection. And I phrase this from all that is broken comes connection. We can only connect when things are broken. And so that seems a very important contemplation for now. And with the NLP, one of the things that we can learn to do is have a sort of language pattern for connecting to our clients, and that's something that this series of Tarot On will probably be covering as we go along. So thank you a lot for your time and attention. We're coming up to our 40 minutes, and I'll sign off now. Any questions, anything you want me to cover in the following Tarot Ons, then please just drop a comment into the Facebook group as well. Look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Christopher, thank you for your comments. Debbie and Derek, everyone else, Vicky and everyone, thanks a lot for your time and attention. Hope you enjoyed the bedtime story. Look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye for now. And keep safe and sane, everyone.